Hey everyone, RogueGold here, welcome back to The Division 2, and today we're doing our Seasonal Descent comm recap. That's right, as of this week we received our final weekly comm from the Descent game mode for this season, First Rogue. And as I've done for every season since Descent's release up until now, in this video we're going to recap all of the lore and information we've learned from these comms. And honestly, this might have been my favorite batch of these yet. As many of you likely saw, I did a number of mid-season videos discussing these comms simply due to their sheer relevance to the ongoing story and plot, but in particular, this season's comms really worked to expand and deepen the Division's larger world, which was quite cool to see. So, in today's video, as we always do, I'm going to go back, chronologize everything, make this as concise of a recap as I can. Per usual, a few things I need to mention at the top here. Firstly, if you want to see the recaps I've done for the previous seasons thus far, I will leave those linked down in the description. Secondly, as goes without saying, this video will include spoilers for the Descent mode's comms, which if you don't know can be received from the mode's weekly project. So in case you'd rather claim and listen to these in-game for yourself, you're likely going to want to click off now. There will however also be spoilers in here for 3 of the Division franchise's transmedia projects and properties, those being the Hearts on Fire audio drama, the Broken Dawn novel, as well as the Crossroads novel trilogy. Like I said, this season's comms really made a push to expand the world and lore connectivity, but just keep in mind that some degree of spoilers from all of those elements will be in here. You've been warned. And then finally, and this is a unique disclaimer to this season's recap, these comms, if you've listened to a few of them or maybe you just heard discussion surrounding them, include several redactions, which is not something we've really seen in the Division's lore drops before. Primarily, these redactions center around a specific location mentioned by several characters, and through much investigation and cross-referencing, the community discovered way back towards the beginning of this season that that location in question is Silver Creek, which for any who don't know, was set to be the new location we'd explore within the Division Heartland spin-off game. Unfortunately, that game was cancelled roughly 1 month prior to the release of Year 6 Season 1, this current season of the Division 2, and so while we have no official confirmation of this, of course the devs aren't going to be given permission by Ubisoft to illuminate the situation, it is our understanding that it was far too late to pull these comms from the release slate. Typically these things are recorded months in advance, and so the use of redactions was likely the option they saw best fit to keep the comms in, but to remove the canon Heartland tie-in aspect. That all being said, there are many characters, plot lines, and more here that were clearly placed in to begin laying the groundwork for that game and narrative, and so given its cancellation, it is unknown moving forward how relevant these things will end up being, if at all. It's possible that many of these threads go dark if Silver Creek is no longer something the franchise plans to introduce. Conversely, as many in the community have said, you never know if Heartland content could be repurposed and used in future Division projects, or if its general lore and characters could be used in other transmedia projects. For now, we simply don't know how things will go, so for the purposes of this video, we're just going to cover what we have, how it was given to us. Alright, and with all of that finally down, let's get into this recap. Following our usual format here, I've taken every Descent comm from the season, this time 20 in total, reordered them to be presented chronologically, and I aim to make this all as comprehensible and digestible as possible, so let's get to it. We begin far back in the Division's world and timeline prior to the events of the Division 1 in the Green Poison outbreak, and we see a character named Kevin Park speaking to Matthias Trig Schneider. If that name sounds familiar, it's because we killed him, oops. But yes, Trig was a manhunt target back from Season 10, Price of Power, where we were hunting down General Anderson, but obviously this comm takes place long before then. We see Kevin pitching Trig on a new technology called Link. Now this is interesting, as marketing for the Division Heartland game prior to its cancellation had revealed that this new triangular shade patch on the Division agent's arms seen in-game were called links instead of patches as we know them in the Division 1 and 2. But Kevin describes this as an autonomous communications tool used to collect data, not that dissimilar from something like Isaac or Anna. Trig slips up, telling Kevin that he should really pitch this idea to Claire, obviously referencing Claire Ortiz, who we've covered in past Descent comms. Her and her husband were the ones that created Isaac and Anna and worked secludedly within Ortiz Robotics in partnership with DARPA and the US government. Trig regrets this slip up immediately and vehemently tells Kevin to shut up when he presses on who the individual could be. Later on, Kevin informs Trig that the Link system has been upgraded in hardware, battery capability, customization potential, and more. Trig tells him that so long as he's able to provide the proper documentation and have a compelling presentation, then he he has full faith that he'd be able to get the project funded, presumably by Ortiz or DARPA. Our final chat between the two sees Kevin inquiring about Claire yet again, as he supposedly ran into her at an AI conference. And after hearing whispers about what her company's Isaac project is capable of, Kevin is shaken. He tells Trig that he feels compelled to warn the American people about it, otherwise the launch of such a system would violate all semblance of privacy laws and expectation. Trig proceeds to plainly warn him that disclosing any information about Isaac would be treason, and that it would land Kevin within the confines of a deep, dark prison cell. We then skip ahead in time much closer to the events of the Division 1. These following comms seem to take place within 1 to 2 months after the green poison outbreak, and they center around Donovan Tower, who, as we discussed in a previous video, very much seems to be the character previously known as Killian Tower, who was the rogue agent and seemingly central antagonist of the Division Heartland from the cinematic intro trailer. Now, some have theorized that this Donovan character is Killian's brother, or something like that, and certainly there is no evidence to disprove that, so anything is possible at this point. But given some additional information that we're about to cover, I'm leaning towards a rename, and they very well might have changed his backstory as well, as you'll see shortly. So, we first see Donovan calling Harlan Lloyd at DCD headquarters, yes, the same DCD headquarters that we fought in and cleared in the Division 2. And for any who don't remember, Harlan was the outcast strategist that we captured in the Potomac Event Center mission. In their conversation, Harlan references escaping the detention center, which was featured in a classified assignment, as well as Roosevelt Island, which leads me to believe that this is happening post-Outcast formation, and that any work happening at DCD is under Outcast control. This is relevant because Donovan is asking if Harlan has any way of providing him medical support. He is seemingly stationed at a lab in Silver Creek, and he reports that they've had an outbreak while seemingly trying to work on a cure for the green poison, and as he reports, the virus has mutated. As a side note, this also aligns with the setup for the Division Heartland, where the trailers convey how the virus behaves differently in Silver Creek compared to the rest of the country, but Donovan says that the scientists are scared that he himself is sick, but Harlan unfortunately has to relay that he has no way of helping, both due to a limited amount of supplies and the fact that all long distance and government transport has shut down. We then listen to a subsequent series of calls, beginning with him dialing Mackenzie Reed at MIT. Some very interesting notes here. Mackenzie Reed is the Division agent who narrates the aforementioned cinematic trailer for the Division Heartland. And in that trailer, she describes how the setup for the game is that she was in Killian Tower's division cell in Boston. He then out of nowhere kills his entire team, save for her, and she then tracks him to Silver Creek to try and figure out what's going on. This is why I believe that the Heartland story got remixed a little bit from its original pitch. Donovan and Mackenzie clearly know each other, as we'll cover momentarily, and they have roots in Boston. I mean, Mackenzie is physically there at MIT. So, I don't know, you draw your own conclusions there, but here's what goes down. Donovan talks about how somebody named Wendy Wright is dead and therefore he had to step up and take charge. Mackenzie seems concerned by his conviction, but he proceeds in asking if MIT is close to developing a BSAV or broad-spectrum antiviral to cure the green poison. You might recall that this was the thing that everybody was trying to develop, including Jessica Candle all the way back in the Division 1. Reed, however, says that their work is not far enough along nor ready for any kind of use, and after Donovan's continued aggression, she hangs up on him. So, definitely very neat to get a real peek at the events in Boston and how MIT was one of these labs and centers trying to work on a cure. But we're not done yet, as Donovan then dials up Ann Arbor, a location which we have indeed seen before in the Division universe back in the Broken Dawn novel. This is where April Kelleher and Agent Diaz travel, as April follows the trail of her deceased husband's work on viruses and a potential cure. They do indeed reach a lab there, but it is then swiftly raided by the Black Tusk. So these events would seem to predate that, as Donovan reaches a woman who the comms keep nameless for some reason. She gives him about the coldest shoulder imaginable, telling him that Ann Arbor will not be supplying any research or virus samples to aid their lab's progress, primarily due to protocols and classified information. She finishes their call by recommending that he reach out to DCD headquarters. This leads Donovan to call Harlan Lloyd once again. He explains the ordeal that he's in, and while Harlan still can't offer any resources, he suggests that Donovan and his lab begin doing regular blood withdrawals from any asymptomatic carriers, as that's their best shot at obtaining clean virus samples for future testing. At an undisclosed point in time, though I think this is after Donovan's spree of long-distance calls, his sickness has worsened, and in the comm we hear him being treated by someone named Liam Kane. Whatever Liam's plans are, apparently they are experimental at best. Donovan suspects that Liam is glad that he and his team are infected so that he can use them as test subjects, but Liam insists that that is not the case. However, he does stress that they are out of time. He promises that his treatment will keep the virus at bay, and so without other options, Donovan gives the go-ahead. We then take a leap in geographical location, but stay within a similar time frame frame to Calvin McManus. We hear a comm in which he contacts an unknown individual and activates them as a hunter. His orders are very simple: to assemble a team and go straight to Silver Creek. We then hear that the hunter is having trouble in recruitment, as they apparently reached out to Noble's squad, the legendary cell from the Division 1, yet the squad declined. Cal is frustrated to hear this and also stresses the secrecy of this mission, as he says that no one can know that he is involved, at least not yet. Next, we hear that the hunter has recruited a team, in which Cal is very pleased. He compliments the speech that this hunter gave to the team, talking about how insinuating a threat to the core was conniving and effective. This is of course a cool tie-in to the Crossroads novel, where we learn that 3 Shade Corps, giant underground facilities across the US Midwest, are the hub for powering and keeping the Shade Network online nationally. So, for this hunter to use a threat against them to motivate these agents to join on is definitely interesting. Apparently they also threatened rogue agent activity, and so to tie these elements into a mission to Silver Creek, even if they didn't have any validity, they had to at least have been plausible to be convincing. So it will be interesting to see if we learn anything more about that. Then finally, the hunter reports that the team has made it to the base in Silver Creek. And this base very much seems to be the lab that Donovan was holed up at. We'll get more hints of this later. Cal says to go down and access a hunter bunker that is supposedly in the basement, as he wants the team to secure, quote, the roster. More on this soon. We then move on to my personal favorite storyline of this season's comms, happening a short while later, that being interactions between Aaron Keener and Melanie Hoskins. Now, I'm sure you all know Keener by now. Hoskins, however, some of you might not be familiar with. She was the central character and protagonist of the Division Hearts on Fire audio drama back from 2021, which depicted a first-wave agent's experience in Manhattan as the world fell apart. Now, Hoskins was a devoted Division agent, going so far as to eliminate her own sister at the end of Hearts on Fire as she was threatening the security and integrity of the city. However, the first comm here sees Keener potentially persuading her to switch sides. From the sounds of it, he showed her some of the intel on the true threat that us and our own agent have been learning about over these past few seasons, and while Hoskins isn't opposed, she's not yet fully committed. Keener says that he wants her to be his Ajax, which for any who don't know was a mythological figure, much the same as his call sign for Fei Lao with Cassandra. Ajax was mostly known for being a heroic warrior in the Trojan Wars, among other accolades. Next, we hear Keener has an update to give Hoskins regarding her family, who escaped the outbreak by going to their farm in upstate New York. Hoskins is worried that Keener is threatening her after he says that he sent someone to make sure they were okay, but he insists that it's merely a way for him to show her the protection and resources he can offer her should she choose to go on a mission. That mission, to travel west to, you guessed it, Silver Creek. The next update we hear is from Hoskins, who just left Chicago. Bam! To my knowledge, our first big intel on the Windy City in the Division universe. It and Boston are my top 2 picks for Division 3 locations, and many others have said they'd like to see those locations as well. So I certainly think it's interesting that we see some lore on both of them in this drop, but Hoskins reports that the city isn't faring better than any others. It has many Canadian refugees who fled south from the winter conditions thanks to the lack of border control, and she reports that convoys of truckers and biker-geared crews are coming in and out of the city. And while not confirmed, I believe this to be a nod to the Roamers, who was a faction introduced within the Division Recruited novel. We then take a quick detour back to the Calvin McManus storyline, as we get one lengthy comm where he is contacted by, presumably, a member of the Hunters team in Silver Creek, and while Cal is initially apprehensive due to the potential of his involvement being leaked, this Agent Zabala has some noteworthy information to pass along, as he informs Cal that Melanie Hoskins is en route to Silver Creek. Cal freaks out at this and pretty immediately connects the dots that she must be working with Keener, given that she was stationed in Manhattan and suddenly knows the location of this highly confidential town. Cal further expresses concern that Keener has likely compromised her mission, fooling her into believing that he is the enemy, which is cool to know that Cal is aware of Keener's vendetta against him, but he feels sure of this given that Hoskins is willing to go through, quote, a blizzard in the middle of February, which finally gives us a definitive reference point. We know this is happening at the end of the winter / beginning of spring prior to the events of the Division 2, but given the pressing threat of Hoskins' arrival, Cal orders Zabala to get the aforementioned roster onto a USB drive and scrub it from the Shade database. And this is where we learn that this roster is a Hunter roster, aka a list of every Division agent that secretly has Hunter clearance and is in Cal's pocket. And Cal stresses that they cannot let Keener get his hands on that intel. One interesting note is that he then also wants Zabala to wipe any trace of the redacted protocol, and I find it very interesting that they're redacting whatever that is. I assume that means it's not the Hunter protocol, so what is it? Could it be tied to the Reapers that we hear Mackenzie Reed mention in the Heartland trailer? I don't know, but interesting stuff there. Zavala agrees to carry out Cal's orders, though we do hear some coughing, indicating that he has caught the same illness that Donovan had earlier, and we establish a connection with Donovan as Zavala ends by saying that he's called a meeting at the conservatory, which I believe would confirm that he lived through his illness and Liam Kane's experimental treatment to the mutated virus. That's of course if I have my timeline set straight here, you never know. But regardless, Cal says that he wants to hear about what Donovan wants. Moving back to Keener and Hoskins, we hear that she has reached Silver Creek, and her first observation is that it is apparently a war zone. She says that there's a weak resistance in place, but that there's zero division presence to protect the town. Keener stresses that Cal's Hunter is the objective, and instructs her to contact him once she's reached the installation. Next is where things get interesting. Hoskins reports that she found the base, entered without opposition, and located a USB drive containing the Hunter roster. Seemingly the same one that Agent Zavala had backed up and just told Cal about. She also notes that thanks to Isaac reconstruction, she saw how the division team that was stationed there came into contact with the green poison mutation from the lab working on an antiviral, and that they had all scattered and died. Does this mean that Zavala, potentially even Donovan, died in between this short time from his conversation with Cal and Hoskins' arrival? Did they deceive Isaac into thinking that they're dead? Is it something else entirely? I don't know, but something must have gone down for Zavala to leave the USB drive that Hoskins and Keener now have. Keener, for some odd reason, also says that the detail of the team dying to this virus should be scrubbed from the database and tells Hoskins that he can have Theo do it. That is the entirety of this one big connected Silver Creek storyline. Absolutely a ton of wild reveals and information in there. I have a feeling that we'll be sifting through and connecting more dots as time goes on. We do have two final unrelated comms to cover, however, and those feature conversations between Manny and Birdie after the finale of Year 5 Season 2 and our confrontation with the recruiter. First, Birdie elaborates on the line spoken during that finale mission where she states that our comms are their comms, and proceeds to give Manny a breakdown about how the systems are interconnected and draw from one another. Here, she reveals that Natalia was working on a way to remove that exploit from the Black Tusk systems, and because of the deception for Birdie to think that they were working on the same side, she aided Nat in that project. The bigger bomb here, as we did cover in a prior video, is that Birdie suggests that we are the rogues. Manny is offended by hearing it, but Birdie explains that if Cal leads the division and he's allied with the Black Tusk, that by us opposing them and him, we are technically the rogues. And then finally, we hear her elaborate on the mechanics of the biometric locks that the Black Tusk has on its more secretive bunkers. This was previously mentioned in relation to Barden Schaefer and how he's one of the last surviving BTSU members who could still have access to these locations. But she explains how advanced their systems really are and how they're virtually impossible to dupe, and how even the slightest hiccup in authentication can trigger security protocols ranging in severity from several hour lockdowns, all the way to kill switches, gas releases, shock treatment, and more grisly options. And there you have it, my friends, all 20 comms released from the Descent game mode from Year 6 Season 1 of the Division 2, wrapped up and presented in one concise go. I sincerely hope that this recap helped in your comprehension of what we learned this season. I know the distribution method of these comms isn't everybody's favorite, but hopefully these videos help you keep up. Any further questions that you do have, or whatever reactions or thoughts you might be building after hearing the info in the video, leave all of it down in the comments below. I'd be very curious to read through everybody's takes. If you enjoyed the video and you want to stay up to date on future recaps like these and all kinds of updates and content for the Division 2, then I hope you'll consider clicking that sub button if you're not already a part of our community. We'd certainly love to have you. That is going to do it for me today though, folks. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Ow.